Welcome to the Amazing Clarks podcast on the Black Love Podcast Network. My name is Anthony Clark.
And I'm Melanie Clark.
And we are the Amazing Clarks. We're both award-winning certified life and love coaches and a husband and wife duo that have been coaching together as a team for 22 years and that have been passionately in love for 30. They call us the Amazing Clarks because we empower people to live amazing lives.
And you are part of our love revolution. We are talking about energy, ideas, and concepts to help you love yourself and others more because we sure do need more love in this universe.
That's right. So this part of the show, we have Catching Up with the Clarks. But once again, this is a continuation of our last show when we talked about our amazing trip to Ghana, Africa.
Yes.
And so on this episode, we're going to continue where we left off last time. So if you didn't check out the first part, make sure you go back and check out that last episode.
Yes. So we left off with the fact that we had visited what's called the Slave River. And this was a really spiritual experience for me. You know, I think like most people, slavery is like a concept. It's an idea. We've heard about it. We've read about it. But can I tell you, when we went to this river, so this river is it's not a tourist attraction, but it's like sacred ground that they've kept, and they allow people to come and do tours to understand what happened to our ancestors. So when they were captured, they were chained together and they were walked for how many days through the jungle?
Well, they were had to walk for months at a time.
Yeah.
And literally hundreds of miles. And they were shackled, our ancestors, and they were stripped naked. They were chained to each other, and they were marched through the jungles. The men, the women, the children, the ones that were either if you were slow or if you got sick or just tired, they would tie you to a tree and they would cut you so that the animals could smell you, and then the animals would come and they'd eat you alive while the others escaped. So they basically used our ancestors as distractions. As decoys so that they can continue the trek. And millions of them died in the jungle. And then those that survived that then had to survive the slave dungeons.
Well, first they walked them through this river to this area where they cleaned them up and got them ready to sell. So they would make them bathe in this river because they had been walking through the jungles for months. So we went to this river and we were able to walk the path that they walked to get their, what they call their last bath.
Last bath, yeah.
And so Anthony and I were able to walk barefoot in the path that they walked on. And can I tell you, when I could feel the energy in the ground, it was incredible. I felt so connected to our ancestors. Mm-hmm. And then we bathed in the river. And while we were bathing in the river, the ritual was really releasing pain that was taken into our energy and our cells through ancestral healing. So we were literally doing ancestral healing at this river. And it was so beautiful. And like just thinking about it just makes me want to cry. It was so overwhelming. And to think, you know, and this just really struck me, you know, as Black people in America, there's this narrative that we're not enough and it's a negative narrative or whatever. But to know that so many of our ancestors took this journey and that we are their ancestors, we survived it. How powerful and how strong must their DNA be that they went through that, and the ones that survived, we are their offspring. So that means we have the strongest DNA of the African people that came across here. We survived. And when I tell y'all the women, oh my God, the women, that's why Black women are so powerful and so strong. We are so strong because the women were ripped apart from their husbands, for their children. They had to take the same walk. They battled through it. And then they had to deal with rape in the dungeons and just so many atrocities. But so many of them survived it, and we are their offspring. And I look at that and it just really put it into perspective for me. Like, I look at life through a different lens now, and I realize that if our people can survive that, we can do anything. Mm-hmm. We can do anything. We are powerful. We are powerful, powerful people because we come from powerful, powerful people. So to me, the story of slavery is not that we are not enough. It is that we are incredible. We are incredible that we survived that.
Yeah,
And so it was a lot of spiritual growth for me.
Yeah, I agree. And when we took the bath, we bathed in the same river that our ancestors bathed in when they had the last bath. And at that moment, I really, really felt the energy.
Mm-hmm.
And it broke me down. And I cried. I cried like a baby.
I'm still crying.
Yeah. And, it was pretty interesting because, some of the people there, they looked at it like, hey, why are you crying? Don't cry. Be strong. And it was like, you crazy? I'm being strong now. By crying, I'm being strong because I'm being vulnerable. I was very, very okay with that, with being openly emotional. And it was very cleansing.
Yeah.
And it was very healing. It helped me to connect more with the ancestors. I literally felt what they were going through. And so it was very powerful. Then we went to the dungeons.
Yes. So from the river, then we went the next day to the dungeons.
Mm-hmm.
That was too much emotional shifting for one day. So then the next day we went to the slave dungeons. They call them slave castles. I refuse to call it a castle
they weren't
because
castles.
it is not a castle. It was a dungeon because horrible, horrible things happened there. And we just learned what they went through, how they packed 400 people in this small space. And, they had a governor that was overseeing it that would have women brought into the court and cleaned up so that he could rape them. And then he would send them back into the dungeons. Women, like I said, were separated from their children. They were separated from their men. And something that I never thought of, you guys, maybe you've thought of this, but I didn't think of it. They didn't know what was happening to them.
Mm-mm.
They didn't even know what was happening. They were just living their lives. They were out getting water and someone would snatch them. They were kidnapping them. And so I just thought about not only was it so horrific that they were locked in these dungeons, they didn't know why they were there and they didn't know they were being taken somewhere else. They didn't know where they were going. Mm-hmm. So this whole time, all this stuff was happening to them and they had no idea why and what was going to happen
And their
next.
family never knew what happened to them. It's like they just disappeared off the face of the earth.
Yeah. And even that part, I didn't know this either. In Ghana, what they did was after a certain amount of time, they stopped talking about it. And I think this is a really important point. They stopped talking about what happened because they felt ashamed, because they decided it's bad. We don't want to talk about it. Let's pretend like it didn't happen. And then they realized that their children were not learning the truth. And they realized by not telling the truth about what happened, they were leaving the door open for it to happen again.
Mm-hmm.
So they went and they refurbished all of the dungeons. We were at one. In Ghana alone, there are 40 dungeons. We visited one.
And that was...
Yes.
Yeah,
it was crazy. And so they realized we have to tell the true history and we have to face it. And they had some responsibility in it because at one point, the chief, the king, whatever you want to call him, he allowed them to take African people. And then that started them. They got the Portuguese.
Right. He did it reluctantly.
Yeah, he did it reluctantly, but they owned it. So they came back and they said, we are sorry we allowed that to happen to our own people because it was their people. We're their people. And that's why they're inviting us back. They're trying to right a wrong.
It's a form of reparations.
It's a form of reparations.
Right.
And that's when healing happens. When you acknowledge something bad, you apologize for it, and you do something to make it better. And that's what Ghana is doing. And, a lot of people said, why would you go look at that? And it's so sad and you wouldn't want to see that. No, we need to know what happened to us. We need to honor our ancestors and we need to heal from it. And I'll share this with you guys. When I went and I saw that, it broke my heart. I'm like Anthony, it broke me down. It was so sad. But then I also just really realized the strength and the power. And I fell in love with my ancestors. Right. But you guys, I'm half white. So I had to face my white ancestors too. And I had to realize the atrocities that they did. And those are my ancestors too. And I had to really do a lot of forgiving and realizing that they were not evolved, that they were brutal. and they were not evolved souls, and they did not have love, and they did not have compassion. And being half white, that I want to make sure that I'm compassionate and that I have love. And as someone who has white DNA, we all need to be the most compassionate that we could be, because we come from a very brutal history, and we will never heal from it if we do not face it. If we do not face it and say that happened, and I'm sorry that that happened, and I will do everything in my power to make sure that people are never mistreated like that again.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You know, for me as well, it's like I was a link in a chain that was by itself. So I was like a separate link. And going to Africa and having that experience, it felt like I connected to the rest of the link, to the past and to the future. I felt complete.
Yeah.
And I felt a belonging, a part of something beautiful, and that has been here since the beginning of time. And it just healed me in just so many ways that I didn't expect. And I didn't even realize how much I needed it.
Yeah.
Yes,
Me too.
yes.
There was literally, by facing all of that stuff, there was literally a part of me that I didn't know was missing that showed up. Mm-hmm. So much more love. And y'all know I'm pretty loving already, right? So even more love came into my body. Even more love came into my heart. Even more connection came in. And that's what happens when you acknowledge what's going on in life, when you acknowledge the past and you look at it and you learn from it and you grow from it. And that's what we went and did. And so
and you know, it was actually, I just realized why one of the reasons why it probably touched us on even a deeper than normal level. And it's because when we coach, and we've been coaches for 22 years. Yep. And when we're coaching, we're tapping into energy.
Yep.
And yes, we're being logical, but really we're channeling. And we put our energy into other people's energy and feel what they feel. And so by having that experience, we were tapping, using those same techniques and tapping in to the energy. So we were experiencing it on a much deeper level.
Yep.
And which I'm grateful for as well. But it was that just hit me. It was just the realization, like, oh, that makes sense.
You know what we are guiding people to is more self-love. And that's what we experienced, because if you think about it, like, think about what we talk about, you guys, like, we're doing inner child work. This was ancestral work. It's so much deeper. It's a deeper version of ourselves. And we noticed we fell in love with ourselves more. And then we fell in love with each other more. But weren't we just, I mean, we love each other a lot, but do you feel like Ghana, just having that experience together, changed our relationship?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. And I had made a post about that, where I was saying that coming to Africa, not only did I fall more in love with myself and Africa, but I also fell more in love with you.
Yep, I did too.
Yeah. And sharing that experience and that adventure with you, and that connection and something so sacred. And even just you having the lady balls to have the courage to take the trip to Africa with me, and to want to go. So it was like that was beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
So I loved it all.
I definitely fell more in love with you too. And, part of love is living life together. Like, when you're choosing a partner, you want to think like, who would I want to spend my life with, and what kind of life do we want to live? And you and I have always, from the first time we started dating, we talked about living a big life and having adventures and doing something big and having big contribution. And this was us like stepping into that on the next level. So of course it created more love between us. It was awesome.
Yeah.
So even though we had some...
Even the sex was hotter in Africa.
You can say the sex was hotter. It's okay.
Sex was hotter.
Sex was hotter in Africa.
Yeah. We were getting
Actually, but we brought it back though. We brought that hot sexiness back, baby. That's it's still here. I'm not even going to lie to you right now.
It was like, look at this connection. This is next level. All right.
I'm feeling the love.
Loving the motherland.
For real, though. Right?
That's right. DNA activated.
Dun, 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 dun. So even though those experiences with all the slave stuff were sad, you guys, it was liberating. And I hope everybody hears that and you don't avoid it, because it's liberating. You will learn to love yourself on a deeper level by looking at it.
Yes. So let's talk about the food. Okay, let me say this. We've been pescatarians for about 7 years now.
Yes.
And our spirit was like, you know what? For this trip, let's get off that pescatarian
You
trip.
are
so
free
we can
to eat the meat.
You are free to eat. and man, oh man. First of all, it was not like the food in America because it was fresh. It was there wasn't all that processed stuff.
They invented organic.
Man, I thought I had a pineapple before. I've never had a pineapple. For 50 plus years of my life, I've been eating this thing in America that I thought was a pineapple.
It ain't no pineapple.
We tasted a pineapple in Ghana, and it was like, what is this? Like, that's a pineapple. It's like, whoa.
I can only describe it like when you eat a pineapple in America, the core is hard and you can't eat it. In Ghana, you can eat the entire pineapple. The core is sweet. It's soft. It's delicious.
All the fruit, all the food.
A banana. You guys, we ain't eating no bananas in America. A banana tastes like a banana, not banana flavored in Ghana.
Yes.
It's the real deal.
Yes.
Everything was just delicious.
Yeah, the meat was fresh. So we had chicken. We had a little bit of beef here and there.
Yeah.
With the stew was
amazing.
Oh.
You know what was
interesting?
The
banku.
Banku. Yes.
And with the stew.
So what is banku?
Banku is like it's like this dough kind of thing that you eat with the food.
It's cassava.
It's like
cassava dough, and then you dip it in the stews and eat it, kind of like it's kind of like a poi or something like that.
Yeah, and it was funny because our tour guy was laughing at me because he was like, "You've never eaten that, but you eat that like you were born here." Because it was just like the DNA just kicked in. It was just like I just knew what to do with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The food was so good, and I think we felt so comfortable eating the meat because they are the inventors of this idea of free range. You know how we're like, free range chickens, free range. We're giving them some room to run around. No, you ain't seen free range till you're in Africa. Goats running around the street, chickens running around the street. Like all the animals are free to roam around.
Yes.
And they're not contained at all. They're living amongst the people. And they're in traffic. There were goats in traffic. I was like, is that a goat walking?
They cross the street better than people.
And they stop for the goats, like, get out of the way. Okay, go. Okay, we're going. So the food was amazing. And one of the best experiences that I had, and I love this so much, I love the community. Everyone in Accra goes to the beach on Sunday. And can I tell you, kids, married couples, single people, partying, dancing. They set up, you walk into the beach and they're like, do you want a table? You get a VIP table right in front of the ocean. There are people entertaining. There were acrobats on the beach, horses for horseback riding, musicians, people selling anything that you could decide that you want, and is just one big party and everyone getting along and everyone celebrating that it's Sunday and just communing with each other every Sunday.
Dancing and partying, and I got up and started dancing and doing my thing, and then some other Ghanaian brother got up and started dancing with me, and we were like compared, like doing different moves together. And they're the same moves, just with a different twist. So I'm doing my little Brooklyn thing. He's doing his Ghanaian thing. It's like, check that out. It's like the same moves because it's the same people, the same DNA.
Yes.
Yes, it's in our blood. Let those drums start playing. You'll see the black people.
Yes. And so because we went on weekend excursions, we got to, like Anthony said, we got to see rural areas. We went to a river. Oh my goodness. We stayed at this beautiful hotel called the Royal Senchi Hotel. Beautiful hotel, and it's on this river. So we took this ride on the river together. We were on this river boat, seeing this beautiful river, and there's little islands all around it. And our tour guide was telling us that some African Americans own these little islands and they've built hotels on them. So our brothers and sisters are going over there and building businesses, setting up their lives. After we went and did that, we went to an awesome restaurant called Mabel's Table. And Mabel's Table is owned by African Americans, and it's this beautiful restaurant on the beach. and their home is built on it. And we got there, and there were a bunch of American expats that they congregate there. So they were having a little meeting, and they invited us to their meeting, and just talking about what's going on with politics, what's going on with money. They told us how we could apply for dual citizenship, how we could get land to build on, and just everyone co-oping and helping each other really set their lives up there. And I found this fascinating, and I know it's the truth. There were a couple of older people there that had gone to retire, and they were literally saying that they know moving to Ghana added 10 years to their life because their bodies, they could feel their bodies healing. One guy was telling me he had really bad knees when he got there, and he said, I just started going in the ocean every day. And he said it took about 2 weeks, and he said the inflammation in my knees went away. And he's like, I walk like I never had any knee problems before. Yes. Blood pressure going down because of the food.
Mm-hmm. And the sun.
And the sun.
And beautiful clean air.
Yes.
Yes.
So,
it's the Garden of Eden. You know, one of the things that really, really blew my mind, which was amazing.
So many,
beautiful.
Right?
Yeah, so many things. It was that there was no crime there.
There
was no murders. There was no. You can have little petty crimes here and there, but for the most part, not at all. Not at all. That's the safest I've ever felt in my life, being in Africa and being in Ghana. In America, I've never felt safe like that. I'm always looking over my back, over my shoulder.
You feel like you got to watch your back.
Yeah, you got to feel like you got to watch your back, but in Ghana,
no, you don't feel like that.
You don't feel like that.
One night we were walking,
and you don't even see very many cops.
No.
You don't need it.
One night we were walking home at 3:00 in the morning. We had gone to have breakfast, and we were walking back to our hotel. And so we decided to take these back streets, and it was really dark. And then there's like people kind of walking around. There are kids walking around at 1:00 in the morning. That's how safe it is. Like children on the main streets. Mm-hmm. And so we're walking, and it was really kind of dark, and I could tell there were people on the street. And I was like, I am not scared. This is weird. I am walking down a dark street, and there are people on the street. I can't really see them, but I know there's people on the street, but I do not feel scared. You can just tell that no one wants to harm you. And it was crazy because like you can see it in just their daily interactions. Like when they drive, they honk at each other, honk, 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 but it's not road rage. They're like, I'm on the side of you. I want to pass you. They're just or there's no sidewalk. So they're honking to let people walking knowing I'm coming up behind you, get out the way. And it's just like crazy that you just don't see the aggression. Again, we're back to the aggression. The aggression is not there. I was the
aggressor if anybody
Anthony was the aggressor. They're not aggressive. One day we were eating and someone raised their voice, and I'm not kidding, everyone on the street stopped to look and see what was going on because they're just not used to people yelling at each other. That's incredible. Mm-hmm. But I'm with Anthony. The main thing that stood out, because we talked to some people about this, they don't believe in killing each other. They value human life. Murder is not a thing there. That's not how they settle disputes.
Not in Ghana.
Not in Ghana. I don't know about other countries in Africa, but not in Ghana. And then you guys, when we came back to a bunch of murder trials.
In America.
And it was just so contrasting. And then also to just think like, we're just so used to murder. It's on TV. It's everywhere.
Yeah, you don't see that very much on the TV.
They didn't have, we watch television there. You know what they have on their TV? News. What is news and what?
News, sports, and their versions
little
of
soap
novellas.
Operas. Yeah. Soap operas about relationships. Everybody loves a relationship, right? Yeah. That was huge. That was so noticeable.
I was going through the channel and it was like, look at that. No violent. I'm not seeing those violent movies and people shooting each other left and right. It was like, I get it. Right. And and I really truly believe that in America, the African Americans here that are descendants, that what we experience in Ghana is what we truly are as a people.
Yes.
And the whole slave trade and the traumas and the years of oppression and the programming, we've been turned into something that we're not.
Yes.
And it was good to see that, to go back to the source of what we really are, which makes me realize that we can be that again, because that's who we are. And so it's a matter of us, unprogramming ourselves or in creating reprogramming ourselves to go back to our roots.
Well, I don't even think it's a reprogramming. It's a remembering. Mm-hmm. Remembering who you really
are.
But
it's the unprogramming
of love.
It's the unprogramming of the crap.
Yes.
And the stuff that we've been
Yes.
taught that we are.
Absolutely. So, as you guys could tell, this was a life-changing trip for us.
Then here's something else that got me too, that blew me away. We were in the village with the tour guide, and then we had a little car issue.
Oh, yeah.
And the car overheated, and we're like out there. So it was like, okay, how's this going to work out? Because there's not like a Pep Boys across the street, anything like that. There was a hose with a metal piece, and the metal piece rusted. And as we were trying to look at it, we were under the hood, people were just passing by. And they would come and they'd look and what's going on. And the whole community got together and started coming back with like hoses, and somebody went to get crazy glue, and somebody went to get a saw, and then they came back and they cut up this metal pieces, and everybody's working together, and I'm sitting back observing. Nobody's arguing, nobody's fighting. The young kids are helping, the older people are helping, and everybody's just working as one. They created their own replacement piece. So basically, they were their own Pep Boys. And can I tell you, it worked perfectly. And they started that car, and everybody just started to kind of walk away like, there's nothing. And I just started clapping. And I was like, hey. And they all stopped and looked at me like, what's going on? I was like, kudos to all of y'all. That was amazing. I just loved it. I love it. And they were like, oh, thank you. And it was like, man, I'm proud to be African. I'm so proud to be African. Yeah, well, that was amazing. So resourceful, just so creative, and just so much community. Wow.
Well, one of the things that Steven said after that happened, because we were super impressed, he was saying that the kid that kind of figured out how to make the part, that he's like the techie guy in the village. Mm-hmm. So he handles all the tech for everybody in the village. And that he, I think he was going to be going away and going to school. He was going to be going to MIT. Yeah. And so that's another thing, you guys.
Very educated.
Very educated. So the children, listen to this, parents, they pay for their children to go to private elementary school to prepare them for high school, because the high schools are so good that if they don't go to private elementary, they can't make it through high school. Mm-hmm. And the high schools are so difficult because they're prepping them for university.
The kids they teach the kids 3 languages in elementary school. Mm-hmm. 3 languages.
Yes.
Americans, we have trouble with 1 language. Jeez, trying to learn 3.
Right. So just a whole nother world, life-changing trip. We just wanted to share it with you guys. We learned so much, and we learned so much about ourselves. And it absolutely goes back to our love revolution. We need to learn to love every part of ourselves. Our history may not be the prettiest history, but it's our history, and we survived it. Not only did we survive it, we thrived it, y'all.
Yes.
We thrived it. And
Yes.
I feel a lot of pride in that. And I think it's really important that we reconnect with our roots whenever we can, and that we recognize that we are part of Africa, and Africa is part of us. And they're
Yes.
welcoming us back, so we should welcome them too.
Right. And it was great, too, that both of our DNA, we both have Ghanaian roots in our DNA.
Yes.
And also, which for me, this was like, got to get to Africa, mm-hmm. because a lot of you may not know it, but I did my DNA and I found out that I share the paternal bloodline with Pharaoh Ramses III, who's the last ancient black pharaoh. And so that really even added more to my... That's right. Man, you're my queen, baby.
That's right, baby.
That's right. And so that even was more, that made it even more special to me.
Yes. Well, I don't know. Have we talked about True Legacy Foundation
on
this podcast?
We haven't. No.
So we also have a nonprofit. Like I love to share this with you guys because I live with him and I get to experience it. But Anthony's amazing. I know I always talk about how amazing Anthony is.
No,
but he's got incredible intuition. And so he had started saying like 5 years ago that if as African Americans we could reconnect with our roots, we would feel more empowered as a people. So we started a nonprofit. It's called True Legacy Foundation, and we collect donations to get free DNA testing for African American youth. We want young people to love themselves because they're our future, right? And to be connected. So we started this foundation, and the whole foundation is built off of the idea: if you go back to Africa and reconnect with your roots, if you know where your DNA is, you know where you're from. So we did our DNA, and just by doing his DNA, he felt more empowered.
Yeah.
So
and you know, and that was so important to me because growing up as a young black child in America, you know, I remember being in third grade class and we're going through history, and the teacher was like, "Okay, the white kids raise your hands," and the white kids raised their hands, and then she told us about their European ancestry and European history that went back thousands of years and all the amazing achievements that they did and contributions that they've made in the world. And then she's like, "Asian kids, raise your hands." And the same thing with the Asian kids. And then at the end, it's like, "Black kids, raise your hands." And they're like, slavery, Martin Luther King. And that's it. And we're like, what? Is that it? We have no history? And basically we were taught that we didn't have a history as black people. And so that always bothered me as a child. And in actuality, it made most of the black kids in the class embarrassed to be African. Mm-hmm. And then when they would show us things about Africa, they were showing us, you know, the ancestors being naked and hungry and just dirty and chained up. And it was like, as a kid, you don't want to be associated with that. Then you look at the European history and the white kids, and it's like, man, they had it good. I'd rather be that than what I am. And so it creates like an identity crisis in you. And it makes you feel a little inferior. Even if you don't want to admit it, you actually feel that because you're being taught that you're inferior.
Because there's a comparison.
Exactly.
And you don't get a good comparison. You're
right.
The low.
And I'm going to be real. One of the biggest insults that we would, as black kids, that we could throw at each other was to call each other African. And be like, "You're an African." "What? You're an African. You're an African." Because we were taught and programmed to hate ourselves and to hate people that look like us. And so once I got to a certain age and started doing my own research, then that's when I learned the truth, that Africa is the beginning of civilization. They have more contributions to the world than any other race of people. The mathematics, the science, all of it. But we weren't taught that. And so that inspired me to get my DNA test. And then when I got that was life-changing for me. And I felt like I belonged to something beautiful and
great.
And I knew who I was. At least I had a basic idea of who I was and who my ancestors were. And so that experience was so powerful for me that I was like, I gotta help. I want others to experience that. Mm-hmm. And I knew that the average black family, that they're not focused on that because they're focused on day-to-day life. And if they have that extra money, they're not going to spend it $300 or $400 on average to get a DNA test. So at that point, I wanted to start the nonprofit to raise the funding so that we can connect our black youth to the African roots. And once we did that would happen, then that would inspire them, a lot of them, to want to learn more about who they are. It would increase their self-esteem, their self-confidence, their self-pride, their self-image. And it actually can have a positive impact on them throughout their entire life. And so that's why we started True Legacy Foundation, so that we can take back our narrative as far as who we are as a people and not leave it to Europeans to tell our history and who we are as a people.
Yes. And one of the things that we discovered, and we didn't realize we were going to discover, and I just want to tell you guys every little thing, was that the Africans were so smart. Once they realized that they were being kidnapped and enslaved, they started fighting back. Mm-hmm. And they had magical powers. They were using plants. They had this plant that they would plant all around their villages because if anyone came near it, the plant would lay down. So then they would know if there was an intruder.
We got to see this plant. We got to see interact with this plant. Yeah, and it was mind blowing.
You wave your hand over it and the whole plant lays down. So then they would know if someone was coming in the periphery. Then they started setting up rocks to the entrances of their homes that were low to the ground. So you'd have to stick your head in first to get in. So if it was an intruder, off with their head. And so they started getting, and then they had This is very interesting. There were reports of them utilizing plant medicine to make themselves invisible. They were talking about them levitating.
I did a lot of, before we even took this trip, I did a lot. I've been doing research for years and even a lot of European history. And I was running across that quite often about stories about that from and Europeans were writing about that.
Yeah.
That they experienced.
They had like magical powers. And so the enslavers started realizing it. So that's one of the reasons that they wouldn't let them talk to each other and they separated them. And why even when they got in America, they wanted to disconnect them from their roots. They took away their names, because the names lead them back to their villages and they connect them to each other. So there was a whole campaign of separating Africans from each other because they knew they were powerful when they communicated with each other. And so that's part of why I believe today still African-American people still have to work on our connection with each other because it was severed on purpose to keep us from being as powerful as we have been. So that, you guys, that's the love revolution right there. We got to love ourselves. We got to love our roots, and we got to love our history. So I know that's a lot. We dropped a lot on you guys today. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. I hope you're following us on social media. Our handle's The Amazing Clarks. I posted a bunch of pictures and videos. If you want to go look at this stuff, go to our Instagram and even our Facebook. There's a lot of it on our Facebook page.
Yeah, so for all of you guys, you know, for hanging out with us on this episode, I want to say Madasi to you all.
Medasi.
Madasi means thank you. And if you want to respond back, you can say Akwaba.
Akwaba.
Akwaba. You're welcome.
You're welcome.
So on that note, make sure you guys get a copy of our book, Crack the Code, The Secrets to Achieving Your Happily Ever After. If you want to become a life coach or want to learn some lessons, some techniques to life coach yourself, check out our Law of Attraction Life Coach Academy at the Law of Attraction lifecoachacademy.com. And anything else, baby?
Remember to love yourself and each other. Your energy affects everything in the universe. And the more love that you have for you, the more love that you spread in the world. We love you guys so much. Thank you for listening.
There you go. We gave it to you. Now what you going to do with it?